For this video, we're going to be talking about Realphones 2.1. We're going to be going over all the advanced settings that you can use to adjust the emulation and the crossfeed and the EQ for your headphones. What that means though is that you will have to have either the professional or the ultimate versions to access what we're going to look at today. We take a look here. The advanced mode is not available under standard, so you would need the professional again or ultimate. The professional though, if you upgrade to that, it does get you a couple more things. It gets you the custom calibration profile and a couple more standard calibration profiles if you have multiple headphones that you want to use. It also comes with some more emulation environments, so that's useful. Let's go ahead and switch to advanced mode. Before we start changing settings though, if you have a setup that you already like, go ahead and do save that. You can save that under your user settings here in the preset menu or on the snapshots on the left. The main difference being that the snapshots include the volume and limiter settings, but I believe the presets don't. So hopefully they'll consolidate that in the future. It's a little bit confusing at the moment. So again, what you'll want to do is first choose your headphones. They do have a couple of generic settings available for all the versions. There's the Studio Close or Studio Open, where you can choose your particular profile for your headphones. They do have a lot of headphone manufacturers. The EQ settings for those are already available. We see on their site here, they've got quite a few options for the different manufacturers, so hopefully they have one that works for your headphone. Even if they don't though, you do have a pretty detailed custom option here. You can turn on different nodes and you can set up a custom EQ profile for whatever you need to change here to make it work, and you can find those on a lot of sources on the internet. Some of the audiophile folks have EQ recordings of the headphones as well, so you can get a profile in the different nodes there. So the first thing we want to do, once you have your headphone profile selected, I just want to touch on briefly what the correction actually looks like here, so we can make sure that we're on the correction view. Then we can see there's actually three parts to this correction view. There's kind of a ghost outline here that represents the default EQ curves for your particular headphone profile that you've chosen. When you are making any changes, you'll see an orange curve show up, and that's the actual correction that's being applied for the parameter that you're adjusting. And then the solid white line is what's projected to be the final EQ curve for the headphones. So you can see here on this example, if we go to 100% full, it's theoretically going to be a flat line. It's pretty hard. It's pretty exaggerated for the headphone itself, and it probably won't sound very natural at 100%. Typically, you will find that we're going to land somewhere lower than that to keep it still natural for your headphone, but more towards the corrected side rather than the completely natural headphone curve, which, at least for most of our mixing purposes, is going to be a little too variable. We'll want a smoother profile than that. But I just wanted to point that out so that we know that there's those three parts to this graph and what that looks like and what that means. All right, so let's get started with the adjustments. The first thing we'll want to do is go to the preset menu at the top. And for this set, we're going to use the reference monitoring normal option. And we can just load that preset. Go ahead and adjust the headphone, the volume output pretty low to start. We'll probably push this back up as we go along, and there are some parameters we might even push it more than is normal or slightly uncomfortable. But for now, let's set that pretty low. The first sine sweep can get a bit harsh when we get to that point. Also, let's go through and turn off all the different parameters that aren't the correction. And so you'll notice as you hover over some of these, they might have an optional little power indicator, and you can turn all of those off. That way we're only hearing the parameters that we have adjusted so far. right, it looks like we got all those. For this video, I'm going to provide some testing audio, and I do have some files available in the background there. I'm also going to suggest, though, using music, actually using different songs. I'll provide some, in the edit, I'll provide some example songs and maybe some elements to listen to. Obviously, my taste in music is probably not going to be the same as yours, and that's fine. But it'll give you an idea, and then you can go find your own songs that you want to use as a reference point for some of these different parameters, and you'll have an idea of what to listen for. But for the video, I'll also include some audio files here that we'll play. And those audio files aren't going through my Realphones, they're just direct to the recording for the video, so you'll be able to reference those and use those and follow along as well. All right, for the initial correction setting, we're correcting this parameter here. So we can go ahead and lower that down. We want to stay on this graph. If you happen to show the room in the window here, you can just change that to correction so it doesn't switch back and forth quite so often. And what we're going to do here is just listen to a sine sweep. So again, maybe set your volume low until you can hear the sine sweep through, and then set it up to where it makes more sense for your adjustments. Let me play that. All right. What we're listening for there is we want to correct the headphones. This is doing the initial correction of the headphones, trying to make it flat without sounding too unnatural. What can happen with a lot of the EQ curves, whether it's SonarWorks or Dirac or it's this, when you force headphones or speakers to be too flat, it can actually sound really unnatural. But that's still our goal. We don't want to worry about the tone so much because some of these different parameters that we're going to set later will change the tone. But we do want to get this as flat as possible without sounding unnatural. Let's take a quick look here. Looks like for today anyway, I landed at about 70%. They have a pretty good manual for Realphones, and if we take a look under the correction, they describe some of this as well, and they note that 75% is their default recommended. They don't recommend going below 50%. They do say 50% is recommended for users who are really accustomed to the default sound of their headphones, so some reference information there for us to look at. I did have to increase the volume a bit to make that a little bit more present. Again, the sine sweep, the tones get a bit piercing once it gets to the high level, but that worked for me. And then we'll probably find as we go along that we need to bring this volume up a bit more as well. Tuning Realphones, you're probably going to find that as you come back, you'll have slight adjustments even after this work. And as you start to listen to other songs and as you start to do your mixes and see how those translate, you'll come back and you'll do some tweaking. Even potentially this correction profile, you might find that you need to make it more flat than you've chosen at the beginning, and that's fine. It just gives us a starting point here. All right, the next option is the presence option. Go ahead and turn that on. For this one, in the video, we'll reference just a pink noise sweep. Try to get the highest setting without any resonances or ringing or strange peaks that you might hear. I do think music will work the best for this one, but for now we'll use the pink noise here. And now we'll do an actual sweep of same pink noise test tone. Right, so that was for the presence option. It looks like for today I landed at about 45. Let's take a look at what the manual says for the presence option. So it says typically 75% is suitable for default setting, but you might want to adapt it to what works for you. They do note here that it controls for sharp variations of frequency response. Let's move on to the pressure option. For the pressure option, if you take your hands and slightly lift your ear cups off your ear for your headphones while you're listening to music or different test tone, you'll hear how the sound changes, and that's kind of what this is referring to. It's referring to correcting for that type of a sense of pressure. I'd go ahead and turn the output volume up a bit for this test once I start the actual test sound, because again, this is one of those where we'll want to push the volume a little bit, push the headphones just a bit, so you can get a sense for that pressure. I'll go ahead and use a sustain tone here, and then we can do an intermittent. Okay, and then let's do an intermittent. All right, so it looks like I landed at about 1.4 on the pressure setting for today. We look at the manual. Looks like they don't necessarily have a default or a suggested range for pressure. They do describe here that you might want to increase the pressure control if your headphones have deviation towards high frequencies due to an inappropriate fit. So you can play with that one and see what works best for you. Again, these are so far just corrections for the headphones themselves, trying to make them flat, trying to make them a good baseline for the rest of the different crossfeed and HRTF settings that we're going to have. All right, now that we've got our headphones optimized, we've got them corrected, we've got the presence and pressure set for what should be optimal for our headphones. We're going to go ahead and use a bell test tone for setting the angle, the HRTF, and then the ambience. For now, make sure that the ambient setting is, again, turned off, and then we'll definitely get back to that before we finalize our settings here. Let's turn this on. Let's set the HRTF to 0 or off to start. We just want to set the angle. Let's go ahead and set that to 0, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to start the test tone and start to play with this. What we're trying to do is listen to where it sounds, psychoacoustically most like you've got a couple of speakers kind of out in front of you. And for this, we want this angle test to be just to where we start to perceive that opening. So I'll start playing that and we'll take a look here. All right. Oh, let's take a look here. It looks like I landed at about 15. Yeah, 15 degrees. Um, yeah, and it looks like per my notes, that's kind of typical for me on this portion of the test. Now what we'll want to do, I'll go back to that bell sound again. We'll want to slide the HRTF slider back and forth. We'll want to listen to how realistic, again, that virtual speaker presentation out in front of us sounds. Technically, 100% should be the most accurate, but I find that lower settings are usually a bit more accurate or realistic to me. And the manual, let's actually pull that over again. Also, a couple of notes there. Okay, back to the angle that we just set for this initial test, and we'll go back and change this once we get to the ambience. But for the angle, they do note 60 degrees is kind of a typical default, and a range of 60 to 90 is usually best. For HRTF, though, which is what we're going to set next, they do say it's set to 75 by default. And they got some more notes there on what it might look like once we get to the ambience piece. But for now, again, let's go ahead and turn that on. I'm going to play the bell test tone and slide this back and forth just to see again what those virtual speakers out there at a very narrow angle might sound like for the most realistic setting on HRTF. And I'll admit, this one is difficult to listen to. If any of you have a good suggestion for what might be a better test for this, that would be great to share in the comments down below. All right, let's take a look here. So it looks like I landed at about 53%. Again, the manual said 75 is kind of a default, but really just whatever sounds good. And this is probably going to be one of those that you'll come back to several times as you start to listen and modify your parameters here over time. All right, now that we've got the initial angle and HRTF setting done, let's go ahead and finalize this angle setting. I'm going to play the same bell test tone again. I'll offer a suggestion for maybe a music choice to follow along with on this one as well. And this is where we're going to set the final angle. Note that when we chose this reference monitoring normal preset, they actually gave us this room that'll be tied to the ambience in a moment. But what we want to do for the angle and for this listening test is, as I play the bell test tone, just try to picture these far field monitors out in front of you and set the angle of the crossfeed to something that feels appropriate for having those monitors out in front of you while you're listening to the test tones. Okay. It looks like I landed at about 65 degrees for myself. This is going to vary, and it'll also vary for the style of headphone that you have. You'll find different settings for like a closed back versus an open back, and really what that looks like. Generally speaking, the crossfeed and kind of the psychoacoustic emulation of having a speaker out in front of you is more realistic on open back headphones than closed back. Today I'm using closed back for the video so I don't get too much bleed into the microphone. But yeah, that's where we landed so far. And then next we're going to look at the actual ambient setting. All right, so now for the ambient setting, let's go ahead and turn that on. This is going to be referencing that room that we see here, that the preset loaded. This is Studio 21A. It's set to the far field monitors right now. You can change those settings here. You can choose a different setup if you want to, but let's leave it like this for now. At the moment, we're going to exaggerate the ambient setting for this test. Let's go ahead and go above 100, maybe somewhere between like 120 to 140, whatever feels right for you. What we're going to do with this test is exaggerate that room ambience a bit, and then I'll play a delayed audio track here so that we can get that feel for what the reverb of the room might sound like in that ambience. And then we'll just adjust that a bit more. We'll make sure that our angle and our HRTF settings still fit with that and what that feels like. And then we'll see where we land on a final angle here. All right, so it looks like through that test I did narrow it down just a bit. I'm at 80 degrees for my angle. The HRTF I'll leave for now. Again, what I was listening for was this picture that we have on the screen here, these far field monitors kind of out in front of me, what seems the most realistic for a room and where those monitors might be, and that's where we landed. What we'll find is that this ambient setting is pretty exaggerated. It can sound really good with music, but it's not realistic. And probably the easiest way to do that is to identify that is to listen to some spoken word stuff. I typically like YouTube video, like I think DJ Payne, for example, has a podcast video where there's multiple people speaking and they each have their own mic setups and they're in their own room. And that's a really quick and easy way to example what this sounds like, what the setting sounds like. And often what we'll find is moving this ambience down quite a bit, maybe, 40 to 60 or something is what seems most realistic for that. And I'll put on the screen here a link to that particular example, but you can use any kind of a spoken where there's some kind of a background reverb. I'll also provide here just a quick test where we can listen to just a 1, 2, 3 demo. Try to adjust to where this might be, for example, like in a small bathroom where there's a quick hard echo, but it's not too exaggerated, and this will get you in a ballpark for what might be realistic. And then again, you can listen to some other source outside of this video for what that might look like. So let's do that quick test here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. So yeah, I did end up narrowing that down quite a bit. About 61% is where I landed today. Looks like, per my notes, that's pretty typical. Again, 40 to 60, sometimes 70. And I'll include that source in the edit for the other option there from a YouTube video. So we've got our correction in place. We've got our crossfeed settings and our HRTF, and we've got this room ambience set up. We'll also notice here that there's a speaker that was chosen, and this is kind of a different tone for the actual emulation. You can choose different options here. Again, depending on your version, I think the Ultimate might have more options here. But it chose for us a D-sonic balance target. And we can turn that on, and that's what this response setting is. And you can see that it's actually changing the EQ curve to match whatever this speaker tone might be. And this is where it could get really exaggerated. For example, let me set lo-fi. And then you can see what this does to our work so far. If I take this, to 100% for lo-fi, it's really changing that curve. So this gives potentially a lot of tone. For this reference example, we do want to leave it on what it provided for us there, which was the D-sonic balanced studio target. And you can see that this is much more gentle. It's basically just a bit of a tilt, actually a bit more of almost a Harman type curve with the bass elevated and the top end being pulled down. And then this is where we'll start to, again, if we've done the corrections and this is sounding, our headphones are sounding maybe too bright or too bassy or not bassy enough, this is where we start to get into some more adjustments to get that tone back that we might want to hear. And there's actually a tone parameter if you have some final tunings you need to adjust, but for now, let's just focus on the response curve. It looks like I just have on my notes for using just a pink noise. So I'll play that again for us here. Let's see. Just do the general pink noise. And then I'll adjust that. And again, we're just kind of adjusting for a general tone, what seems natural or good for us there. If this were that studio and a balanced studio speaker. All right. So for me, it started to sound pretty dark there if I went above about 60% with, this current setup and these headphones. It could be a totally different place for you, and that's fine. Again, this is just trying to get a pink noise sound that's a good reference point, a good balanced sound, a good tone. Let's go ahead and move then to the density parameter. And let's actually take a look at what they're describing this as. Let me pull over the manual. So the density is simulation of low frequency body vibration. So what they're trying to do here is they're trying to get your headphones to emulate what it might be like to have bass, to feel like that body bass response. And so for this one, we'll probably want to, they're recommending a value of 100%. We'll see what we land on there. But you may want to turn up the volume of your Realphones as well, so that you can start to get some of this frequency input. Take a look at my notes here and confirm how we're testing this one. Okay, yep, I do have a sub pattern available for us here. So let me start playing that, and then I'll pull up the volume on my side and see and at what point I start to feel that, and then I'll play with the density parameters to see what I land on for my particular headphones and this setup that we've got so far. All right. So I did actually end up a bit above 100. I think the recommendation was for 100, but I ended up a little bit higher than that. That's what felt good to me with these particular headphones. And we do notice that on the correction curve, that was quite a bit of a boost there at the lower end, maybe 50, 60 hertz. So I may need to, do some mixes, see how that's translating, and come back and pull this back a bit. But that felt good to me at this point for the adjustments. Looks like I do have a song suggestion for that as well. So hopefully I put that up on the screen there during the edit. You'll have another reference point to check out. And then let's take a look at the warmth parameter. Let's take a look at what the manual says for that one real quick. Tonal variation in speaker sound. Okay. Setting it to 100 will correspond to the actual measured impact of a room with those room reflections. This is, again, trying to make like a warm sounding room, trying to emulate that in our headphones. It looks like the default value they recommend is 50%. So let's see where we land. We're going to do the same kind of a test there. Let's pull that back and turn that back on. All right. So on that one, I landed at 30. Again, they recommend 50%, which looks like would be 50 up there, but started to sound a bit exaggerated, at least on my headphones for me. So I have that at about 30. And that's what sounded good. And then that's pretty much it as far as the actual tuning itself. There is a tone parameter here, so you can enable that feature and you can adjust the tone specifically if you have things that you think you want to adjust to make it sound better, or if there's an element that doesn't seem to work for you. You'll notice it's not necessarily a high, mid, low band. It is very specific. For example, when you look at the mid, it's more like a vocal presence EQ. So do look at that if you do adjustments there. Note that, that's a big low shelf and a pretty sharp high shelf there. So just take a look at that if you're going to use those parameters. I typically don't. So far, I've found that it works good just leaving that off with the rest of the default parameters here. Lastly, you may want to, at this point, adjust your volume a little bit. You may want to listen to some music first, see what is a good setting, or if you're using this for mixing, try to find like a dB meter and set it for you can use that in your headphone, your ear cup. Set that to a good reference level and then save that. Again, the snapshot, if you do that here, you take a snapshot, that will save whatever this volume parameter is at. The preset, if you go ahead and save a preset there, it'll be saved in this menu, but that doesn't include the volume itself. So snapshot, preset are similar, it's just the volume portion, and I think maybe the limiter. The limiter you can turn on and off. I would suggest leaving it on, but if you ever see you'll see a value here and this red arrow will turn on if you've hit the limiter. If you ever see that, I would suggest, turning down your output here so that you're not hitting that limiter. It does sound pretty bad actually, but I like to leave it there as a safety item because the different gain staging that can occur with this stuff, it is possible sometimes to really peak that, and that's pretty uncomfortable when you're wearing headphones. So I would suggest leaving that on and just check this once in a while to make sure you're never hitting that. And you can turn it down if you are. But that's it. We've made it through adjusting our headphones and Realphones through the advanced options here. Again, using some of the songs that I've provided just as a starting reference point, using your own music that you're really familiar with. We'll give you some more final adjustments, but you've got an idea now of what these different elements do and how to adjust those and the way that they interrelate with each other. If I find a good source here to share like these demo files, I'll do that as well so we can have that available as a resource. And otherwise, remember, whatever your mix, your music, or your art may be, make your story vivid. Until next time.